Can you edit it so you can like take 10 pounds off?
I wish, dude. If you figure out how to do that, I'm going to take about 30 off me.
You're detoxing there, I see.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. I need to detox. This has already come up on previous podcast episodes. But
about how
unhealthy I am.
About how we're hot messes.
So, the first thing I asked Greg was about his vegan. Did we talk about Greg's veganism?
Uh-huh.
Were you there for that? Yeah.
Yes.
You were there.
We got it. Yeah, excoriating details that no one should ever
We talked
know.
about things. Yeah, right. We didn't talk about those things on the podcast. But yeah,
what made him go
that
vegan?
Came up.
Other than like pressure from his wife.
His wife. Made him. Yeah, she made him. She runs the ship, as she should. She's the smarter of the two. Yeah, definitely.
Well, because never mind.
Thank God somebody there is.
Yeah, Greg's a good guy. We joke and kid because we love him. He can handle it.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So before we get started, Marty told me to ask you about pie. Apple
pie.
Yeah,
apple pie.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me. I'm so glad you said. Okay, yeah. I can't go through this. This is getting a little bit shriveled. I should have eaten it, but somebody brought me apple pie. Yeah. Long story short, I was gifted apple pie by someone in the congregation because someone else tried to give me a real apple pie and they stole it from me.
Oh,
and out
dare they?
Out of guilt and shame,
they brought you that.
Yeah.
That's like the best dad joke in the world, isn't it?
Kind of.
As a display. Like in a Disney movie, they'd somehow make that so that the apple never withered.
Yeah, exactly. That one's starting to wither, huh?
My dad's favorite pie joke that he ever told was, so my dad went back for his teaching certificate and degree when he was like a what's it called? Like when you start school later in life, a non-traditional student. Yeah,
right. Sure.
So he went back and did night school to get his degree. And so anyway,
where did he go?
Oh gosh, he went to Pitt and IUP.
Okay.
He was going to one or the other, and then they cut the program.
Oh.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Yeah, and then he had to transfer and lost all of his credits, and I didn't even know what that meant until I went to school. I'm like, wow, that would be terrible.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was in some sort of math class.
Okay.
And they wrote on the board, pi r square, the formula for, whatever that is for geometry. And he raised his hand. This is his all-time favorite dad joke. He's like, excuse me, professor, pi are not square. Pi are round.
Oh, that's good. That's rich.
Cakes are square. Yeah. By the fifth time he told it, I'm like 12 years old. I'm like, we get it. So anyway.
So talk about your dad. Did you guys grow up on the farm that you're at?
We moved to the farm when I was 4.
Yeah.
So my dad grew up on the north side of Pittsburgh.
Okay. Yeah.
And my mom grew up in Shaler. They got married. They lived on the north side for a hot minute. And then they moved out, actually, to the greater Saxonburg area.
Okay.
I have other family that live sort of in that area.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a tangent, but an interesting aside. So that's where I was born. He built a little ranch. I was born into that sort of greater Saxonburg area. Had we continued to live there, I'd have gone to Knock High School and all that sort of stuff. But we moved to the farm when I was 4. But anyways, all that to say, whenever we would go back to that area to visit family, I always felt like I was going home.
Okay.
And to the degree that even in my 20s, I always, just this sense, like I would, cross the boundary line. And it's like, I'm home. Why does this always feel like home?
That's interesting, huh?
So when I got called to new life, I really felt like I was going home.
Yeah.
So anyways, but then at age 4, my dad's dream was always to have a small farm.
Yeah.
And so the property was available in Shakora, and I think it was mid-'80s. So we made the move.
Yeah.
And we moved up there, and we've done a little bit of everything on that property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we met.
Yep.
The first time we met was at Harvest, right?
Yeah, like 100 years ago.
Yeah. You came to the youth group that I was the youth pastor at.
Yep. And I I was too old for youth group, but I was dating one of your youth group students.
I wasn't going to call you out.
Let's call a spade a spade, right?
You were 30 at the time, and she was 14. I didn't think it was a big deal, but some people got upset about it.
It was scandalous for this part. If it had been in California, we'd have been fine.
Yeah. How old were you?
Oh gosh, I was probably only 18 or 19.
You're like just out of high school, right?
Yeah.
And Kelly was an upperclassman.
Yeah, I think there was 3 years between us.
Yeah, cool.
Which,
Nice.
when you're 30 is like a hot minute, but when you're teenagers is like,
Right.
well, okay.
Yeah.
Just gotta mind our P's and Q's.
Yes.
So
when I moved on to campus pastor in Petrolia.
yeah, we had both moved on at that point.
Everybody,
you from your job and me from that girlfriend.
True. That's true. Everybody talked about the Leicher farm.
Yeah.
And I didn't make the connection immediately when I was up there, but
That's
that
my
was your
folks.
family.
That's
That
my
was
folks.
your parents.
Yep.
Started a farm there and did a lot of produce that they
Yep.
sold locally in the community. People loved that. And
Yeah.
everybody spoke very highly of your Christian heritage. And
Yeah. My folks really left a legacy in that area. And so about the time that I was considering the position at New Life,
which was when?
2014 I started.
Okay, cool.
But around that time, my parents knew that their farming days were going to come to an end, and they had asked both my sister and myself if we were interested in moving up and kind of just taking over the homestead. And my wife and I talked about it, prayed about it, and we said, yeah, we think we'd like to do that. So what once was their store where they sold produce, my mom and dad live in that now.
Yeah.
And we live in my
Didn't
childhood
renovate
home.
it or anything. They just
No,
sleep on the shelves.
we just put tarps on the ground.
Good.
You
That's
know,
good enough.
with burlap. And I mean, my mom, God bless her, she's in her 60s, but she said it's great for her back.
Yeah.
That concrete floor.
I'm sure
It really keeps her straight as an arrow. But we've been blessed. We like being back in that area, back in that community.
Cool.
And my kids live across the driveway from their grandparents.
Yeah.
So, which is terrible for us because every day they run over to see grandma and grandpa.
Yeah.
Granny and pappy. Sorry.
Get spoiled and come home as like little brats, huh?
Yeah, I mean, in the hierarchy in my kids' eyes, there's frogs and toads and dirt. And then there's everyone else in the family, and then there's Granny.
Yeah.
Who may at certain moments outrank Jesus. But,
Where were you at in this hierarchy?
It depends on if I played Minecraft with them that day.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I think the more Minecraft we play, the higher I go on the scale.
Good. That's encouraging to hear. So, did you graduate from Carn City? Where'd you go?
Yeah, Carn City High School.
Yeah.
It's
You're a gremlin.
I am. The mighty Gremlins. We can't be beat. I went to college at a small school in Georgia for a couple of years and then transferred to Geneva.
Did you go to Tacoma Falls?
I did go to
I remember you
Tacoma
telling me that.
for 2 years and then went to Geneva. And one of my professors in Geneva, who actually became a mentor of mine, because I'm a farm kid, flannel and jeans. I grew up in Chicora. We're salt of the earth people. I'm a farm kid. Kind of present myself that way, and I like that atmosphere and that sort of that aspect of my life. And he read my first paper, and he came back to me and he said, I did some research to see if you plagiarized this. And I went, I didn't. He said, I know, but I just didn't think that a farm kid could write like this. So
he's like, I did some research on where Carn City ranks nationally.
Yeah,
it just doesn't add up.
Yeah. And I didn't think they could actually string those words together to form a coherent sentence. But I was like, Mr. Dandoy always taught us, one, it's not done, and two, you got to formulate that paragraph well. Format it well. So, yeah. Carn City, home of the mighty Gremlins.
Very cool. And now you're executive pastor at New Life.
Yes.
Christian Ministries in Saxonburg.
Yep. A little over 7 years there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Really enjoy it.
Well, we were talking a little bit about mentoring.
Yeah.
And some of the holes that are being left by, we just started talking before we recorded about leadership pipeline and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get the next generation, specifically in the church, how do we get the next generation ready for leadership? And you had some interesting thoughts on that, so I wanted to bring you on and share that with everybody.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that as believers, especially as pastors, we have a biblical mandate to train and equip the saints for acts of service.
We do.
And yet, for some reason, I have a couple of working theories as to why this may be. We've really abdicated that responsibility. We have taken essentially the pastoral role traditionally over the past several hundred years, maybe 100 years here in the U.S. at least, and it's sort of been a
You do it.
yeah, more of a
We'll pay you. You do it.
yeah. And you care for us sort of
Yeah.
thing, and I think that springs from an idea sort of a civil religion, right? We're a Christian nation. We have Christian underpinnings, and as a result, the emphasis wasn't so much on training and equipping as much as it was caring for and managing. Some of which was very good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's good aspects of that,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
faithful men and women of God, and like hindsight's always 20/20,
Yeah,
right?
right.
They won't be doing podcasts probably 75 years from now, but there's
You
going
don't
to be
think
some from Shakora who's going to sit across from the future you and be like, well, that guy did it wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think with AI, we'll just be able to just transfer our thoughts automatically to somebody else across the world.
That's terrifying to think that I may continue on into perpetuity. I probably, long run, am going to be, if it is AI, the one that forms the Matrix.
Yeah.
So sorry, world. I apologize for that. But those gaps are interesting because if we take the biblical mandate and we look at how Jesus operated, right? So he calls a group of disciples, and out of the group of disciples, after a night of prayer,
Sure, yeah.
like, right? We always want to blow by that one.
Yeah.
Like Jesus prayed about who should be his apostles all night.
Yeah.
And we're like,
Have you ever tried praying all night?
yeah.
It's miserable.
It's not everything it's cracked up to be. But if the Son of God did it, right? Yeah. And we're like, well, let's call Tom. Tom seems to be good, and we don't pray about it at all. But anyway, so you look at that model with Jesus and the apostles, and what he does is, we've all seen the framework. They watched him do.
Yeah.
Right? They did together.
Yep.
He shipped them out. They did. And then they broke down each of those conversations. You can see it repeatedly in the Gospels. So Jesus comes, he begins to work closely with these 12 guys, and he begins to really hit them with a brand new way of thinking, right? And so whenever any of us are met with a brand new task or concept, we don't have proficiency or competency. We don't know what to do with it.
Okay.
And so what a good leader does in that moment is they break it down and they go, listen, I want you to kind of understand, here's what I'm thinking, here's why I'm thinking it, and you're going to be confused, and that's okay. I have to imagine this maybe didn't make it into the Gospels, but Jesus often said to the apostles, you're confused, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You'll get it someday.
Yeah.
Because I've had several mentors who have said to me, you'll get it someday.
Yeah. Well, we're in John 20 right now, and after the resurrection, the disciples are still completely confused.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
They're standing at the tomb going,
Yeah, what happened?
who took Jesus?
Well, at the end of Luke, he still has to open their mind to understand the scripture.
Exactly.
If we could get in the time machine, don't you want to go back to the road to Emmaus and be like, could you write down everything he said about the prophets, about him?
Yeah.
Could you the Cliff Notes would have been great.
Yeah,
Luke,
they're probably looking at each other. You wrote that down, right?
Yeah.
Blaming each other. I thought you were writing it down.
Yeah, it was so great, but everybody forgot it. But anyway, so he introduces them to this new way of thinking, and he guides them through that intentionally, oftentimes in a small group setting, sometimes in a large group setting, and then sometimes in the large group setting, he intentionally breaks it down further with them than he does with anybody else, which is pretty incredible. That's a golden opportunity. And then he begins to send them out, right? So you've watched me do. They do some stuff together, right? You get to participate in this. You get to hand out the bread and the fish. You get to do this thing. You're participating with me in ministry. Peter gets to fumble around on the water. We get to do these things. And then, okay, now you go do it. Right? But he sends them out with a buddy, right? So they can, again, they're pushing into this whole new area. And then when they come back, what does he do? He debriefs with them. Tells them, hey, you did awesome things. I saw Satan fall like lightning, which I don't even know what that looks like, but that's a cool image, right?
I like when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And
it's a good part of the story.
Exactly. and you're like, yeah, they got it. But they didn't. Right? Probably partially because the learning curve was still a bit too steep. And also because they did not yet have the Holy Spirit in their lives.
That was a big part for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we often downplay the role of the Spirit, but what Jesus makes clear is the Spirit, I mean, he's he is the gas that fuels this thing,
Yep.
this relational component, and us having this understanding. So, anyways, Jesus goes through that whole process, prepare, does it, together with them, sends them out for practical experience, and then eventually, right, he's getting ready to ascend, right, at the end of Matthew, and then at the end of Luke, and the beginning of Acts, and he gives them these final words, and it says, and some doubted.
Yeah.
And you're like, are you kidding me? Like, you've just seen, like, he ate fish with a hole in his side. Like, what more do you want this God-man to do? And I think that if we're honest, that mini snapshot at the end probably is part of the cost of mentoring that makes us avoid the whole process. Because you put all that effort in, and some folks still don't get it.
Right.
But what we miss on the positive is for those that do, they change the known world.
That's what's actually super encouraging about it.
Yeah.
Is even in spite of all of those, what looked like setbacks to the process,
Yep.
that the plan did work.
Exactly.
And it did take root.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it obviously has perpetuated because we're here today. Right.
Seems to still be going on.
Yeah. And so, when we come at it from our, North American perspective, however you want to look at that, the question is, what are we doing today as pastors, as leaders within the church to train and equip the next generation?
Yeah.
And you and I talked, a little bit. We've really abdicated that responsibility to formal education.
Yes.
Right? Like, well, you should go to
Bible
school.
colleges, seminaries,
Which are vital and helpful.
Sure.
Don't
do away with those.
Don't hear what I'm not saying.
Yeah.
Those things have been important to me. I mean, between us, we've spent more money on degrees than we probably have on cars.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
Maybe on house.
Yeah. Pretty close.
Yeah, it's pretty close. So like we value that. But if I'm honest, it has been that marriage between formal education and godly, spirit-filled men in my life who have mentored me that have raised me to any level of competence that I am today. Right?
Yeah.
Like I am literally standing on the shoulders of those that have gone before.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the primary gaps that we note within kind of our current culture is not only have we abdicated that responsibility to formal education, but one of the best means by which we will know if someone will actually become a mentor is if they have been mentored.
Yep.
And we just have a ton of folks, men, women, who have never experienced mentoring.
Yeah.
And so it's just like with any new task. You want me to do what? You want to pour into this person?
Yeah.
Well, isn't it more, doesn't it expedite the process if we just send them to school? It does. It's easier to scale that, understandably. People don't feel qualified for that task. They don't feel like they have enough to offer. They're not trained and equipped to do so. And then you think about all the things that you do in a day. Because you're the lead pastor of a church plant. You guys have, you're still in your infancy. You're not 5 years old yet.
Right.
And that's a vital time for the life of a church. How much bandwidth do you have to mentor one person, 2 people, 10 people? So when we're looking at the ability to sort of scale this out and replicate it, it's going to take a while with a bunch of folks who have no experience with it and don't know what that means. But if we do wrap our minds around it, and if we do begin to kind of pull that together, you get to see folks do far more than any of us could do on our own. Sort of that synergy that comes from that. But we can't get distraught when someone doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Jesus was perfect, and one guy still betrayed him.
Yeah.
And others doubted.
The others, they did quite a lot of stuff wrong.
Well,
too.
they left. Everybody left.
Yeah.
Jesus, I'll never leave you.
Yeah. Like
Except
6 hours later.
Yeah. It's like, Peter, I got a bad memory too.
Yeah.
But really,
Well, something I think that affirms what you're saying that's anecdotal, for whatever that's worth. I went to Bible college out of high school.
Yep.
And by God's grace, I encountered a mentor in Bible college,
Yeah.
which doesn't always happen,
Uh-huh.
surprisingly. But our school had brought in a guy to lead the youth ministry department
Okay.
who didn't have a lot of academic experience, but had real world ministry experience, big time.
Yep.
And his gifting, without any question, was mentorship.
Yep.
And he immediately, I mean, I was there my first full year at that college was his first full year, if I remember correctly. And from out the gate, this dude was gathering students.
Yep.
And his wife was in on it too. So they gathered men and women. And I mean, they would have us over to their house for dinners where they would just show us, just not by like explicitly showing us, but just by demonstrating for us, this is how we operate as a Christian family.
Yeah.
This is how we function as a family in ministry and stuff. And that made a far greater beneficial investment in my life than the entire 4 years of academics. So that was valuable. I'm not against academic institutions. I think we need them.
Yep.
I think it's one place where the church is going to, doctrinal fights are happening at that level that need to happen, and I think there's a defense of doctrine that happens in an academic setting very well. So that there's definitely, I wouldn't do away with any of that. But man, that I still stay in touch with him.
Yep.
I still text him, call him, and it's been 20 years now.
Yeah, and my story would be very similar to yours. Late high school, a buddy of mine, his dad was a pastor. I'd go watch my buddy play soccer. His dad was there. We'd strike up conversation. And he probably had one of the most profound impacts upon my faith development at that stage. And then when I transferred to Geneva, Rich Grassel, who's the youth men prof at the time, just really same deal, groups of guys mentoring us. And really helped us work through all the things that could potentially derail us in life and in ministry, and just showed us how to live as men. Yeah, in a really good way. And blessed with mentors to this day. Even the pastor that I serve with, our lead pastor, Pastor Chris, has invested a tremendous amount in me. And so Pastor Chris, he just eats, sleeps, and breathes this.
Yep.
In terms of, I don't know how formally he thinks about this. I'm sure he thinks very formally about it now that I think about it. But I know just from what I see, like, he's so focused on downloading everything that he can in terms of his spiritual disciplines, in terms of his relationship with the Lord, in terms of theology, to younger men and women who are feeling a call to ministry or are already in ministry. It's awesome to watch. And so now, like you and I were just discussing before we got on camera, he said he's going to edit 10 pounds off me, by the way. So anyway, but we were talking about where you're sensing a next step and where even I'm sensing a next step, and we're looking at being churches that plant churches. Yeah. But in order to do that, we have to have folks in place who can carry that mantle. Yeah. And I think that we'd like to microwave it because we're Americans, right? Like, we can get you the building, the land, and all that sort of stuff, but it's the people that make this go. Yeah. And so there's a level of maturity and competence that, I guess how I look at it, Fred, is like, we owe it to our people to prepare them well. If all we do is pump them up on empty platitudes and encouragement, but we don't equip them well, we've failed them. Yeah. We have, in our excitement to do a thing, we set them up for failure. Yeah. And I don't want to do that to people. Yeah. I also don't want to make a rigorous process that it's like, you can never attain. Yeah, it's like, the training that the Navy SEALs go through or something. It's like, no, Jesus made the gospel simple. We often say it in New Life, but it's not easy. Yeah. And so the challenge that I think that really is before us as church leaders is, how do you identify, train, equip, and send, and carry on? Yeah. Because if we've learned anything from the method of Jesus, even once folks are sent, they still need support.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you guys launched this place a couple years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but you've never really been on your own.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you've been on your own,
Yep.
but could you imagine being completely on your own?
Right. Right.
You know, and I even think that denominational churches have learned that lesson as well. They try to partner folks, you know, with mentors in some capacity. But
one of the challenges, yeah, that's true. I'm speaking, I'm ignorant in this area, but one of the challenges, it seems to me, with like denominational churches is some of that is forced, and so that it doesn't take.
Yeah.
Whereas there was an advantage to not having anybody assigned to us to help us succeed, because it forced us, and I say us, Greg and I and some of the other people that were involved, to build relationships intentionally to find people like the guys at New Life who have made a huge impact on helping us succeed. Whereas, you know, I don't know, I don't even have that experience, but it just seems to me as an observer that sometimes within denominations it's forced and so it doesn't take. Whereas if that desire's there, you can find people there. I'm amazed at how many people have wanted to be supportive of a church plant in different ways, in different capacities.
I mean, any sort of formal mentoring literature that you read talks about the vital component of the placement, right?
Okay.
Pairing the potential mentor with the mentee. And no matter how you slice it, what it ultimately comes down to is, do you like each other?
Right. That's it. That's kind of what I was trying to say. It that way.
and the reality is sometimes the answer is no. Like, you know, I talk like this the whole time. You probably were like, Barry, you're a great guy, but you talk like Mickey Mouse and this isn't going to work. Or you have terrible breath. I don't know. But anyway.
I actually wanted to bring that up after we're done recording.
Well, if you would break out some of the gum you've got over there.
Yeah.
But
here's a mint.
Yeah, thank you. But, you know, you can't, there's a sense in which you can't force that. Yeah. But at the same time, you have to have two vital components. You have to have someone who's willing to share that information, who's more experienced.
Yeah.
And you have to have someone who's willing to invest the time necessary to glean from that person.
Yeah.
And in a culture in the U.S. where we just have no concept of honor, I think that's part of it too. We have these men and women who have forgotten more than we know. And folks in our generation are like, but yeah, they're kind of old.
Yeah.
You know, like he wears a sweater vest.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He also hewed this thing out of solid rock.
Yeah.
With a pickaxe.
Right.
Over 30 years.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a perfect example. So when I started my doctoral program, I had no idea what I'm doing. And my second term, I had two courses. And in one of the courses, I had a prof who was really helpful. He pointed out some things in my writing, and he was just a really helpful prof. And everything's online, so it's all you're just reading. Written word. And because of my background in being mentored, I am really okay with not knowing what to do and admitting I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so we were starting to broach into the whole, like at the end of this thing, I got to write a dissertation on a topic. I'm like, I don't know what the topic is. And so I sent him a couple emails like, hey, I've never done this before. And you've got letters in front of your name and after that tell me that you have.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And so I'd like some guidance if you have the time. Now, here's the important thing. I'm telling him what I need. I'm telling him what my questions are. And I'm telling him that I value his time.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I've got these things. Would you be able to let me know? And there was this thread, like kind of back and forth. And about two threads down, you know, I sent something, he replied. I sent something, he replied. And then he replied and said, listen, here's my number. Call me. Just let me, here's when I'm available. And I was like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what this guy does. I don't even. I've got a little icon screenshot of his face on my. It's the size of a dime. You know. Okay. So I can't even remember his name right now, but I called him, and I said, here's kind of what I'm looking at. And he said, here's what I'll tell you. Whatever topic or theme you're interested in, every course that you have, look at that theme from every different course perspective. He said, you're in organizational management with me right now. Look at that topic from the theme of organizational management. He said, what else are you in right now? I'm like, I'm in leadership theory. He's like, great. Look at that topic, whatever it may be, from leadership theory. Look at it from change management, risk management, the whole way through. And I said, okay. He said, when you come out the other side of this, you should have a pretty good idea of the literature, what's out there, where the gaps are, and that'll help you narrow your focus.
Yeah.
And so now, currently, right now, I'm in a research theory class where they're teaching us how to research, which is, in my grand scheme of things, right above getting rigged over hot coals. But anyways,
sounds so wonderful.
It's really helpful, but it's qualitative and quantitative research. Who'd have thought? That 10th grade statistics class I had 25 years ago. I'm brushing it off. So anyway, 22 years ago. Doesn't matter. But anyway, I took his advice. And now that I'm in this research class, I had to compile a review about what my topic may be. And I just had this whole constellation of information that I could draw from.
Yep.
And I'd already done thematic elements because of all this. All of that to say, what happened? He mentored me in that moment. Was it long? It was an hour on the phone. And so I think sometimes when we talk about mentoring, we get this assumption that it's this years-long, heavy investment, and it could be. But from the mentee's perspective, it doesn't always have to be that way.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But there's a sense of humility that has to kind of go before us, where we have to be comfortable saying, hey, I don't know exactly how to do this thing yet.
Yep.
I know how to do lots of things, but I've not done this.
Yeah.
And you have. What would you recommend?
Yeah.
And that, frankly, is something that is missing in our culture a lot. And if we as church leaders can build a culture of mentoring, and I think the other side of that coin is honor, I really believe that we'll see some good return on that investment.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking through how to break this down into some simple applications.
Yep.
One, get a mentor, right?
Yep.
Like, honor somebody enough to say, I want to learn from you.
Yep.
Whether that's vocationally or spiritually or, in your family life or whatever. Get a mentor, right? And then find a mentee. Find somebody that, if you're 18 years old, somebody out there is going into their first year in high school. You know what I mean? It's not like you got to be, I've been doing this for 40 years, But it's so, I've seen even just that example. I thought of several people who I've watched them go through the high school process and want to help younger people. Like, oh man, I didn't listen to any adult because nobody in high school does. I didn't listen to any adults. So I made all the mistakes. Well, go back and tell somebody. Like, pour your life into somebody and say, hey, can we, let's go to Wendy's once a month or something and talk about how things are going.
And that's why I think, any healthy church has to have that focus on the next generation, which is why children and youth have to be a point of emphasis. For two reasons. One, it helps the person who's being mentored, the mentee, right? But the other interesting thing is, and I'm really starting to impress this on our staff as they're training and equipping team members. When you look at retention of information, you and I will have this conversation, and if we're lucky, we'll retain 5% of it.
Oh, I wasn't planning on retaining any of this.
Yeah, this is. Praise God that we're recording it, right? If we were to write it down, all the different levels of interaction and all that sort of stuff. The single greatest means by which we retain information is we teach it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so one of the true benefits to a mentor, especially in faith development, is if you want to grow in your faith and retain what the Word of God says, get a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Because they're going to ask you, you and I both did youth ministry, they're going to ask you the most ridiculous questions in the world, and you're like, ooh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to teach them.
Yeah, I love it.
You have to research it, and then you're going to retain that.
Right.
I think that we have this lie that to be a mentor, you've got to be like, I don't know, Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Who's a master at these things and say cryptic things that Luke Skywalker never fully understands until he dies and comes back.
Did you see Disney's coming out with an Obi-Wan series?
I mean, maybe I've had that bookmarked in my calendar. Maybe my sons reminded me last night that the new Boba Fett is on. Yeah, and that's on our to-do list for tomorrow.
That's cool.
All hypothetical.
Yeah.
But we obviously there's a sense in which we ought to lead ourselves, and that's a challenge because I don't always lead myself well. But there's a sense in which too we all have something that we get to offer someone, and if we can create that culture in our churches. Like you talked about the pipeline.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll have, this is interesting. This is a good conversation because this is actually helping where I think that even we as a church want to head. The pipeline won't flow until that culture is built.
Yeah.
And I think that as we as churches build that culture, the other thing is when we think about mentoring, sometimes we mentor because if we mentor this person, they'll do what we want them to do.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting.
Is that wrong? Should I not be doing that?
Well,
I'm just kidding. You
not always. Yeah. But what the motivation isn't that we get that person to do the thing.
Yeah.
The motivation, I would say, from a biblical perspective is we're helping that person understand who they are more fully in God and in Jesus.
Yep.
We're helping them unpack their gifts and talents and abilities, and we are training and equipping the saints in that moment. The other thing is, this is interesting. I read a secular article the other day, academic literature, I got to read a lot of it, about motivation to mentor and intrinsic motivation. And they did this whole study around it. They talked to a number of leaders who do informal mentoring, and they talked about all the different motives from external, extrinsic motivator, you're told to do it, to intrinsic motivators. And some of those intrinsic motivators are, I believe that we should do this because it'll make Tom better and Tom's screwing up the team. Or I think that we should mentor because Tom's an amazing guy and I want to help him develop.
Yeah.
But the true intrinsic motivator that they found, like purely intrinsic, was that when people participated in mentoring, they experienced joy.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that makes sense, right?
In that they got to invest in another person.
Yep.
And if that isn't the biblical definition of community,
yep,
I don't know what is.
Right.
You know? And so not only are we training and equipping the saints because it's a biblical mandate, which would be an external motivator, but what I've experienced in life is we experience joy because that's what we're created to do. Yeah. You know, Deuteronomy has the Shema, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God. And, you know, you must do what? You must impress this upon your children. You must teach them as that you sit and as you stand and as you walk and as you every area of life. There's always this sense in which we are to impress who we are and to help and to modify and to shape others.
Yeah.
I don't know why God chose that model. But once we get that understanding culturally within our churches, then some, not all, but some will be mentored to be pastors.
Yeah.
Some will be mentored to be missionaries. Right. Some will be mentored to be teachers, nurses. And at that moment, none of them are better than the other because they're all going to be on mission. This is my hope, everywhere they live, work, learn, and play. But ultimately, as we do that, we will see some who impact their workplace for the kingdom of God, and some that will go into other areas and be about the work of training and equipping the saints. That is a unique calling.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You know, the apostle, prophet, pastor, and teacher.
Yeah, and when you talked about that secular study, it talks about joy as being a motivation to mentor.
Yep.
One of the things, have you ever read through the book When Helping Hurts?
No.
It's a great book written by a guy down in Chattanooga.
Okay.
About poverty alleviation from a biblical perspective, and how, quite frankly, a lot of the book is about a lot of the things the church is doing that's actually not helping people come out of poverty, right?
I mean, would one of his major critiques be like you go and you paint someone's house or something?
Yeah, exactly,
okay.
yeah. So, but the biblical worldview of poverty alleviation has to include a biblical worldview of self, which is that we are created, part of which is that we're created in God's image to be productive and not just be consumers. And as I've been thinking a lot about, especially in our local context, or even just in America in general, so many people living in poverty are experiencing not just a poverty of resources, but a poverty of spirit, really, because they've been told just to be consumers. We're just telling people, like, don't worry, we'll just give you handouts, we'll take care. That'll make you miserable.
You talked about finding mentors, like get a mentor, and I'm going to be 40. I'm going to be 40 this year, Fred.
Yeah,
my back will tell you. And at this point in my life, I've been blessed, and I've also been diligent, that I have mentors in nearly every area of my life.
Yeah, that's cool.
And one of those mentors who really helps me with finances, retirement, I worked with him for a season as a financial planner and advisor and all that sort of stuff. Always, I love him. Always reinforces to me in ministry, but in life, we were designed to flourish.
Yeah.
There's a sense of flourishing. And part of flourishing is being about that redemptive work.
Yeah.
If Adam, pre-fall, worked in the garden, then work is part of what we get to do.
Yeah.
And there's also part of me that, I don't know if I should say this on the internet, but like the idea that all that we do in heaven is like sit on clouds and play harps is the most unappealing thing in the world.
Sure, yeah.
Because I love work.
I don't even know how to play a harp.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
I know, right?
Is somebody going to teach me there?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be so bad.
The good news is you'll pick it up quickly. It'll all be perfect. But the idea that if the new heaven and the new earth are like Eden reborn, then there's going
to be work.
There's going to be,
I hope so.
But it'll be perfect work.
Yeah.
There'll be a concept of perfect unity. Yeah. It'll be like Babel, but without the component that tried to overrun God.
Yeah.
Like, who knows what we'll get to build and make and experience in his perfection the way that he intended it to be.
Yeah, that's actually one of my anxieties because, and this is where faith and trust comes in, obviously. But it's like, okay, if creation has been perfected, well, I don't have a context for knowing what work is in a perfect world.
Exactly.
Right. So I'm like, what are we supposed to do? But I'm guessing it's going to be pretty cool.
I just think because before I had kids, I loved to work on and repair old motorcycles.
Really?
Yeah. And I did
like Harleys, Hondas.
Yeah, I would do I would buy cheap Japanese bikes from the 70s and 80s off the internet that weren't running, and I'd fix the carbs and put a new battery in it and just do the basic maintenance and get them running, and I'd sell them and flip them and make a little bit of a profit.
That's fun.
But for me, you talk about what's perfect work. Perfect work means that I'm actually going to understand timing.
Okay.
On those old motorcycles,
Yeah.
How I can actually set the timing and all the different resistors and capacitors and all that sort of stuff, because I'm not a trained mechanic. I learned off the YouTube, but I'm going to understand how that works and have the ability. I think we'll have the opportunity, not even just the ability, to create and be and be creative and to see what we're working. Like, could you imagine working on and building a table, like a beautiful piece of furniture, where everything is perfect?
Yeah. Yep.
It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what we're gonna do or not, but I think that to kind of cycle it back around to the mentoring side of things, we get to help people understand those concepts so that they can flourish and thrive into who God created them to be.
Word. Yep.
Yeah. And it really will start with us.
Yeah.
Because my thought is this is not, mentoring is not a quick process. Sometimes it can be.
Yeah.
You know, it's calling my professor and going, what do I do here? But if I'm honest, it's some of those long-standing relationships where, you know, we come together and they always talk about, you know, the formation of the mentoring relationship, setting goals and objectives, or knowing what the topic, like how's the mentor going to help you? And then eventually at some point, and it could be weeks, months, years, the wisdom and insight that mentor is giving you isn't as profound as it used to be.
Yeah, of course.
Because you've gained,
caught up.
Yeah,
right?
you gain a proficiency and competency. And obviously, the depending on how great the distance was to start, that time frame maybe. But then you carry on as colleagues.
Yeah.
Friends.
Yeah.
Or the relationship maybe sometimes ends.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that to say that as we pour into people, I really believe that if we want to see church growth explode, I'm doing this for my kids.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you mean. There's only, with the necessity of time,
Yep.
you can't expect it to happen in the next 5 years.
And if I've learned that from anyone, it's been from working with Pastor Chris.
Yeah.
Because everyone will come and say, wow, new life. This, and I came when things were good.
Yeah.
I wasn't on the team when they were hewing this thing out of solid rock with pickaxes. And he always says, you know, it took 10 years, 15 years to become an overnight success.
Yeah, right.
And it's interesting, like, you know, we've been at this roughly about the same amount of time, you know. But we have a desire to see this happen tomorrow. And it may, praise God. But to build those cultures and to see God raise up that leadership, and for us to build out that infrastructure and network. And my hope is, I mean, if all I do for the rest of my life is to keep having churches have this conversation so that some of them get it, so that we get it and move forward on that, I think that'll be a life well lived.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap this up by, are you watching the Super Bowl?
Well, my wife